It's Nancy welcoming you to Garden Scroll. Today is June the 6th, and my friend asking me what perennials I use in the garden has got me to thinking about perennials. So I think today I'm going to talk about perennials, and I'm going to try to keep on the topic pretty much, because sometimes I see things and I forget what I'm talking about and start thinking about what I'm looking at, which could be an annual. But this is a perennial, and this is called catmint. I would definitely recommend it. We'll talk about some of my favorites, and we'll talk about some of the things that people don't think about when they go to get perennials and think, well, I'll just put them and never have to worry with them again. They'll always be there. And it's true that they come back in the spring, but you do have to trim them. Like this little pot is getting pretty full. It won't be long till I'll have to pull some of these out and give them some more room to grow. If you don't give a perennial room to grow, it'll just die. But this is a lovely, lovely, lovely. It's been so pretty this year. Sometimes they're not this full and pretty, but this one has done well for me, and I love it. And then right on down, the next thing I would probably like to talk about is this beautiful yarrow. It has little flat umbels. They come back every year. Again, you'll need to divide it, or they will just choke themselves out if they're not divided. This is another little yarrow. This is called one of the pastel yarrows, and I love this color. As a matter of fact, I forgot I had this color, and I almost bought another one. But I thought, well, the price is a little high for now. I'll wait on that and see if they put it on sale. And then come to find out, I did have some of it, so I really didn't need another one. As I said, this will proliferate, and I can put pieces of it in other places. So perennials are wonderful, but they're not without their own little work that has to be done for them. A garden is just work. I'm pretty sure there is no way around that. And this is where I have some more of the golden yellow yarrow. And right beside it there is a clematis vine. It's also perennial, and I would not want to be without the pretty clematis. And they do not, or clematis, they do not do extremely well in our area. They will just brittle up and brown up and not look good at all in the extreme summer heat that we're fixing to have. I'm pretty sure we always do. But in the spring and in the fall, they are gorgeous. This is another little perennial right here. This is a lily. And they will come back. They are a bulb, but they will come back each year. Sometimes they will even proliferate till you'll have to dig them up and put pieces in other places, or give them away, or toss them. I hate to toss a plant. And this is a daylily. Daylilies can be planted anytime. They are so hardy. They don't mind too much, that a little they do. It's best to do them in spring and fall. It always is. But they really, if you need something for sure in an area and you get a hold of a daylily, it will most likely live for you. But for one thing about the daylilies that I don't like is they do proliferate pretty readily, and they are very hard to dig up unless you do it early in the spring. And usually you're so busy doing so many other spring chores that I anyway neglect to do these. And then once they get this big, it's just hard to dig up those strong roots. But they also will have to be divided to be able to keep living. And then there's the chrysanthemums. I need to get out here and just cut a bunch of this off. But if you want to cut down your chrysanthemums so that they're not so tall and likely to flop over, you'll need to do that before the end of June so that they'll still have time to put their pretty fall blooms on. I have lots of chrysanthemums and I do love them. Some of mine try to go into like a ground cover and just cover up everything though. So sometimes they also need to be divided and just pulled up and gotten out of there so that they'll have room to grow and keep going. Just right over there in that pot I put a penstemon, but I'm going to show that to you in the back where there's a lot more of it. And I'm going to go over to this red salvia, which is another perennial, comes back every year, gets bigger and goes out a little fuller each year. Until it gets to a certain size, it doesn't seem to go ahead and keep going. It's not invasive and it's very beautiful, and you know just by that color and that little tubular bloom, the hummingbirds will come for this plant. And this is a blue balloon flower. It's not in bloom right now, but it's a beautiful plant. It actually poofs up like kind of like her little bubble right there, and then it bursts open and has a little blue daisy flower. It's very pretty. They're especially pretty with like an orange daylily blooming beside it when they both bloom at the same time. Over in this area where I have most of my annuals, but we're not talking about annuals, and I did remember that. So hostas are a perennial. They come back every year, and for me, they even come back in these pots. I do have mine in pots, and the only reason they haven't came back is because sometimes the snails will take them out. But if you put them in the ground, you may have to still look out for snails, but they will do wonderfully well in the ground and in pots. They do well. Of course, the beautiful hydrangeas are perennials. For me, they were hard to get started. I don't know why. I just had to buy several of them and work with them, and snails and roly-polies took them out, and just, I don't know really why. I had such a hard time getting them started, but I believe these are started, and aren't they gorgeous? See this little round blob of beautiful succulent. This is I think it's autumn joy. It's a sedum. It's probably either autumn joy, or I also have some called brilliant, and I used to have some called frosty morn, which were white, but I'm not sure if those lived or if they didn't just turn color. Sometimes they seem to go to a dominant color, as do the pretty tall phlox. But this is a wonderful plant because you can put it in pots, you can put it in the ground. It just doesn't even have to have a whole lot of water. It's a more Xerox plant, and it's wonderful. I love it. And not only is it just a gorgeous little green plant, in the fall it puts on a little tuft of tiny blooms, but makes a big flat tuft, or not even flat really, kind of rounded at the top, and just beautiful, and it draws the butterflies and bees like crazy. I thought now would be a great time to talk about perennials because so many of them are in bloom right now. This one, however, is not, but this is a hardy hibiscus. If you don't have a hardy hibiscus, you just need to get one because they are gorgeous, huge plants, almost as big as your face, and so pretty. They just take center stage when they're in bloom. And these are some of the tall phlox that I was talking about. They're not in bloom right now either, but oh, they are gorgeous when they are. They have a huge bloom. It's more of a bouquet of little blooms that make up the one big bloom. And the butterflies love it. The hummingbirds love it. Try to get this one shaking so much for you, but it's not showing you its true beauty right now, but it is gorgeous. And sometimes, to me, they in some places get taller than I want them to be, and these, just like your mums, if they're going to get floppy and flop down on you, just trim them off. Just be sure you do it before the end of June so that they can still put their beautiful bloom on. And actually, bushes are perennials. This is a crepe myrtle, and it comes back every year. This one is called peppermint lice, and it's a beauty, but it's a very slow growing one. Whereas this one right here is a white one, and it's not slow growing. This one isn't. It just goes everywhere and reaches up into our highline wire, so we have to keep a check on it every spring and clip it back. It even grew wide this time, and I had to clip some off the sides, but it's very pretty and it's there. That's another thing about the perennials. They're right there to greet you in the spring. They just start coming out on their own. Most roses are perennial. This one right back here that's showing up right now with the lilies, right behind the lilies, is a miniature rose, but it's been coming back now for several years. Who doesn't love a little bright spot in their day or in their garden? Peonies are perennial, and I love them so. They are so big and so beautiful. They do not last very long. They're usually blooming when the roses are blooming. Right now, neither of mine are blooming, but this one will not bloom again until spring, whereas the roses may bloom a little bit intersparsely through the whole season, the whole summer season, and in the fall they usually put on another little showing. But the peonies will not do that. They will bloom for you in the spring, and then they just sit there and look like a pretty little green bush as they get terribly dry, and then they kind of look like a brownish bush, but hopefully they'll still look good. Sometimes they do for me, and other times they have burned for me, so it depends on the kind of summer scorchers we have. And see that paler green right under my umbrella trellis? That is Arkansas starflower, or insomnia, and I'm probably saying that wrong. That I had no idea it would get this tall. For some reason I forgot that if I saw it on the package when I bought it. But so far I still like it there, even that tall. So I don't really like it when everything gets so tall in front that you can't see back behind it. But if it just gives you glimpses that there's more back there and you don't know what, it's just kind of like an intrigue and surprise. So I do like that. And I like this little plant because I love that green color, that yellow green color that it has. And in the spring it has beautiful little blue star flowers on it. And this is a St. John's wort bush. When I purchased this, I thought it was just a plant. They do have a St. John's wort plant, and I have not purchased it, and I'm not exactly sure what it looks like, but I'm pretty sure it does still have the same little bloom, and this one's not blooming right now, but you can tell that it is thinking about it. It's putting pretty little buds on it everywhere, and when they bloom it looks just like it has a little tuft down the top of it that looks like it's fiber optic. And the Shasta daisies are blooming. They too are perennial, and they do like to spread pretty quickly. That's one thing you want to be sure to think about when you buy your perennials, because sometimes they will spread a lot quicker than you want. Sometimes I put perennials in a pot just so that's as far as it will go, so it doesn't take over. Usually the Shasta daisies for me will just choke themselves out and die before they will take over anything else. Aren't they sweet? And so anyway, that's why I always do want to divide them soon enough, because I don't want to lose any of this beautiful welcoming summer daisies. The daylilies, of course, they only last a day, but most usually there's several blooms on each one, and so when this one dies tomorrow, since it came out today, these others will soon follow suit and open up to live for a day and then pass away. This little pot, this is sedum. It's another one of the beautiful sedum that comes back every year. You can fill a pot out with it and it will last for many years to come. Sometimes it will play out, and I'm not really sure. I think it's just because of this pot I have this one in, but you can tell that only little bitty pieces of it came back, if you can even see those right there. I think you can see some on that side, but usually it doesn't. If you put it in the ground where it'll have a better chance of making it through the winter, and then you can take little pieces of the ones you have in the ground and put in your pots. Even if they didn't come back, you can fill a pot up pretty quickly. Just put a few in and it'll fill itself out. Now this plant that's growing up around this little pot I just showed you of sedum, it's called an ironweed, and it draws the butterflies. It's a very pretty plant, and as you can tell, I do need to trim this down. I don't want this up here so tall that it blocks the view of my little pot. So hopefully I'll get around to get that done. You know, there's just some things I don't get around to. There's just too much to get to it all. This, of course, is another rose, and it has this is one of the old roses. Actually, this was here when we moved here, but it has honeysuckle coming up in it, and I try to keep it off the ground. I found if I can just, like I've got this netting down here, and if I can keep it growing upward where it reaches for the sun, it doesn't lay down on the ground and become so invasive. But I do have to keep a check on it and make sure, or else it would just get down on the ground and take over everything else that I have out here. So along with the wonderful things about perennials, you'll have to be sure to know that there are some other things you might want to know about them. This is a Russian sage. It is perennial. This is the tall one. They have some now. I think it's called denim and lace, and they are the smaller ones, which I do not yet have, and I want one of those. I don't know where I'm going to put it yet, but I'm sure I could find a place for it. But anyway, I love this little plant. It's not looking so great right now, but normally it really comes to its own in the fall, and we'll just be putting up those little blue panicles, and it will look as pretty as that catmint that I showed you in the front. This little barberry bush is a perennial. It comes back every year. It's been coming back bigger and more beautiful. Sometimes it's a little bit late coming back, and you begin to wonder, is it going to? But so far it has, and it's just been a wonder. And this is some more of that sedum. And I thought it had died out this year too, but it was just a little late coming up there. I need to put some more soil in here, but I didn't want to disturb it once it started coming up. So as you can see, I sprinkled some little seed here beside it so that it would fill the pot up. And then right over here, this is also a perennial sedum, both things that I have in here. This is just a tiny little sedum. I bought a little square, probably no bigger than 2-inch square of this one time at Sunshine Nursery in Clinton, and it just kept going and going and going till it filled this whole little pot out, and it looks great. But you know, right before it, when it was still small, I decided I want to put something else in here, so I put this one in with it, and I like it there, so it will be staying there. But it too is a perennial sedum. This is a miniature sedum, just like those Autumn Joy and Brilliant sedums that I was showing you. It looks just like them, only in a tinier, miniature version, and it does get blooms in the fall, and they're white. It lasts and comes back each year, even in a pot. This is one right here, the sedum. This is one of the full-size Autumn Joy sedums. Sometimes they don't get quite as big if you put them in a pot. They just seem to know, well, I don't have room to grow here, but I'll still do my best to shine, and they do. So that's wonderful. This one in front of it is it's a sedum called Angelonia, and in the fall it has beautiful shades of orange mixed in there. This is another perennial hibiscus. This one is called Copper King. It has a bit of a copper color in its foliage, and it has a beautiful white bloom with a bright reddish pink center when it blooms. And then this is more of that salvia, perennial salvia, and right behind it there is the gara. This one it's sometimes called swirling butterflies, and this one is in the white. I like this up against a fence. I had some on my front garden up against the fence, and they looked so good, but for some reason they died out. So I need to see if I can get some more starts from this one and get some started back over there, because they just light up that blank wall. You can tell I do have lots of perennials. There's no way I could get all this done in annuals each year. I always wonder, and that's the other thing that I was thinking of that's hard about perennials, but I always wonder if I'm going to get all of this chopped out or cleared out so it can grow again in the spring. It's such a hard job to do, and as I get older it gets harder. But anyway, I'm so grateful to have them there, because they're just ready to go again. They come back to me every spring. And this one is a Caffafia, if I'm saying that anywhere near right. It's also called a torch lily, and I can usually remember that. This pretty little plant right here is a dianthus, and I believe it's one of the perennial dianthus. I know that this one is, but it's also stopped blooming now. But it is a beautiful little dianthus in the spring when it's full of bloom. This is a tall verbena, and it's really cute too. It also does put lots of seeds on, so when it begins to seed out, you'll want to remove some of that if you possibly can. You won't want as many seeds as it will put down, but it is so wonderful to have a few of them. And they're actually also the host plants to some of the small butterflies, like the skippers and those type of butterflies. Here's another one of the pretty peony plants that I still have not got the old blooms clipped off. I need to do that. And then as we go on down, this is called a butterfly weed, because you can find it in the pastures, or if you go driving on a dirt road, you'll probably see some of this. But it's become popular to put it in gardens because it's the host plant for the monarch butterflies, and when people found out they were in trouble, everybody jumped to their aid to put one in their garden, which actually, before I knew that it was a butterfly host plant, I had one just because it's beautiful. And then right on up there is that pretty Niobe clematis. It's the only one for me that keeps blooming as long as it does, and I love that. Although I love all my clematis or clematis, I just love it. But you can see what it's beginning to do if you look right down here, and lots of times it will go to where almost everything on that vine is dried up like that, which is not exactly pretty. But to me, it's worth it to have it looking like that. Sometimes when it's dry, I will just take my hands and rustle that old dead stuff off. I tried just clipping it off, but the one I tried did not like that. It just went ahead and died. So I'm thinking, I don't mind leaving that dead stalk there as long as I know it's going to come back in the spring. Irises are perennial, and you may not like the raggedy look of them, but if the gardener would get out here and do her duty, all this would be off of here. But in her defense, she is always busy doing something concerning the garden. But these come back every spring. You'll literally have to pull them up because there will be so many of them they won't even bloom if you don't. They'll have to be divided. That they are so beautiful. There's probably not a more beautiful flower than an iris in full bloom. And to me, I like these little green sword plants sticking up over here, even without a bloom on them. If I would take the ugly part of it off. Like this one doesn't have so many dried tops sticking up. And they look pretty to me. And this is another lily that'll soon be blooming. Oh, and this is a Baptisia false indigo plant. Isn't it gorgeous? It only blooms a little bit in the spring. The rest of the time, this is all you get. Who could resist having that in their garden? Not me. And there's another little display of iris. Another daylily. I have lots of different colors of daylilies. I can look at a daylily book and never want to stop. I finally just decided when I was first purchasing them just to get one off of each page, so I had to choose one. It was hard, but I managed somehow. And now I don't really want a whole lot, if any more, but you know, sometimes I can't resist a new color. But I don't need more because of the upkeep of having to divide them and just keep moving them around in the garden. This is another hibiscus. This is called Carolina Pink, Carolina Ruffled Pink, and it is a very pretty one. More roses. Roses are perennial, and roses are beautiful. And sometimes people say they take a lot of work. And I don't know really how to say it, because sometimes they don't seem to take much work at all. But they are susceptible to some of the insects, and you will have to keep them sprayed. And I don't know, sometimes they just do so much better than other times. And there's another mum and another peony. Another peony, chrysanthemum here with a peony behind it. This is another daylily. This is salvia. Isn't that pretty? And this is purple monarda or bee balm. And all those things that I've shown you, including this one, are perennials. They come back every year. This is a perennial. This is a phenol. and it comes back every year. It's beautiful. This is my newly planted lamb's ear, which I have trouble with lamb's ear. I cannot get it to keep going for me, but I went ahead and dug a hole and put some in-ground cactus soil in the hole, and then put that little plant in there. So far it's looking like it likes that. It is amazing how much difference soil can make if you get the right soil for a plant. This is a little bush that's called a golden carrier bush, and I love it. When it fills out with beautiful yellow bloom, and I'm not going to be able to show you very much of one right now. This is one of them, but it's not in full bloom. They open up about the size of a, well, not quite as big as a golf ball, but close, and just fill this whole thing out. Sometimes they're more scraggly, but if you, on the year that it is just full and beautiful, you'll be so glad you have one. And this is the white yarrow, white ballerina yarrow, and you just can hardly beat a pretty display of white and green. This little plant is called Bouncing Betty, and I had to put it in a pot because it was taking over. And it looks like I may have another plant right back here that's fixing to try to do the same thing and take over. I'll probably have to get some of that up and out of there. Maybe all of it. Maybe have to put it into a pot. But this is, I believe this is the miniature hollyhock. And it is very pretty. I wouldn't mind having it everywhere if it played with them instead of trying to take over. I don't really like that. This little bush is called a sugar shack bush. It has a pretty little bloom on it when it's in bloom, and this is not its bloom. I think this is a seed from last year, but it has a little ball bloom that goes into these little ball seed, and so far they have not put them down anywhere or become invasive in any way, which is great. I've had to get rid of some of my invasive plants. I just cannot keep up with all that. So, and this is the one thing too that I wanted to show you is this penstem, and I have a little bit in other places, but this one just really took off and went, and it is gorgeous. I just love it, and the hummingbirds love it even more. This little plant right next to it is one of the miniature hollyhocks. It's another thing that you definitely have to keep chopped off after it quits blooming, because all of this will go to seed and you'll have more of them than you want. But I know lots of times people say, oh no, that's what I want, something that'll just keep going, but it'll also keep taking everything else out, and you don't want that. Pretty soon you're fighting it instead of enjoying it. But I always want to have at least one or two of these, and I try to keep a check on them. That's not to say I always do. And this little black and blue salvia is a perennial. But another thing you'll need to take note of is sometimes they are called tender perennials, which means if our temperatures get down low enough or stay down low enough or go up and down low as enough times, it will not come back. Mine did not come back this year. I purchased this new one. I'm not sure that was a good idea because I told myself I'm just going to let that go, but then I didn't. So, you know, gardening is addictive. This is a perennial, although I've had one once before and it did not keep going for me. It died out, so I am hoping this one will keep going for me. I just love this little plant. I don't know if it's just because I put it in there with that turquoise and I think they look so good together or exactly what, but I do love this plant. And these are slightly shorter daisies. I love them just planted right here. They're planted in the ground, and then I put this little wire basket on top of them and they grow through it, but I think it looks like they're planted in the basket. This is another one of those swirling butterflies, white Gara. It also is perennial. These are more of the little perennial dianthus, and they have a real beautiful showing in the early spring, and they smell wonderful. There's just a few little bloom, couple, so you can see what they look like, and they're covered with bloom in the spring. This little blue bloom is a hardy geranium, and usually they just take over and they cover up all this, even the little angel or fairy on top. But this year they're not doing so well. I don't really know why they're not. And I haven't been watering them that much either. That could be the reason, but I don't know. I need to see what it is, because I really do like them and hope that they continue on here and just go ahead and fill up all around. Just cover this little stool for my pots and decorative items. Just cover that up, and then usually I have to clip them away so you can see the little decor. These are sweet peas. They too are perennial. They come back every year. It took mine 3 or 4 years before it began to bloom. Oh, and while I'm this close, which this is losing its color right now, and I need to divide this one. You can tell it's gotten wet, it's flopped down. It looks terrible, but I must try to save this because I had to go do a battery change. But I was saying this part of it, it's going to seed, but this is the color it really is. And I love that color. I think I must love all of the yarrows. They're just so pretty. Another perennial. This is another hosta that is also, of course, a perennial. And I love how this little sedum, this is a autumn joy sedum, and it just made a beautiful mound. I used to be a little bit jealous of my sister Kathy's sedum because mine would flop and hers would always put on the most beautiful round, and I just love it. It's so pretty. I enjoy anything that's got a circular or spherical look to it. And then there's another one right here. And those lilies that are also perennials are fixing to open. And these little mounds of green are not in bloom right now, but if you keep watching the Garden Scroll post, it'll bloom and I'll show it to you. And it also has a round bloom. It's called an ornamental summer onion, and it puts on a beautiful allium, round, pinkish mauve pink bloom. This little dark plant is called a white chocolate snakeroot plant. And I don't like the name snake. I'm not fond of snakes, especially since one took out our little cardinal family, all of their children. But I do love this little plant. It does like some shade, and in the fall it will put beautiful little puffy tufts of white all over it. It is a gorgeous plant. I'm seeing there's a daylily in bloom right here. Here's another lily bloom, also perennial. This is a sage. I love this pretty pale blue color on it, and it also is perennial. And this is another perennial of the yarrow. This is the pastel. This is the color I thought I had was the only other color I had, but actually there is some like the one in front that is a little darker than this, and I think both of them are very pretty. Also perennials. They do not always come back in pots, though this one is in a pot and it did come back. But I also had some in this pot and in this pot, and neither of those came back. So that may not be all my perennials, but that's a good portion of them if it's not. And I do love them. This is a grass. It's also a perennial that's right behind this little trellis thing. And it's very pretty too. This little ice or dew plant is, or I think it's called the ice plant, and the smaller one I think is called the dew plant. But either way, it is perennial. I had to buy some in-ground cactus soil for even my hens and chickens to come back for me. There's that one my friend gave me. It's looking the prettiest of all. Then I have several little ones in there too. But they are also perennial, so hopefully they will keep coming back for me now that I've got the right soil underneath them. Oh, and this is perennial. I love this. Oh, I just noticed my little decor is all knocked over there. There, I set her back up, but I'll need to glue her back up there, or she'll be right back over again. But this is that wormwood or artemisia, and I love it. It just spills over, and I love this pretty powder blue color, and I need to get it started in other places. I'm trying to start it in one pot right now, but so far it's not doing real good, but I'm still thinking it might. And speaking of a pretty powdery blue, this is honeysuckle. It's called Kinsley's Ghost honeysuckle, and I think it's beautiful, and it's non-invasive. Columbine is also perennial that comes back, and it also comes back from seed, so definitely I need to get some of this out of here, these little seeds, because I don't want all of those coming up. But it's such a beauty. I do want to have some of it coming up. And this is Snow on the Mountain ground cover, and it is beautiful. It is taking over, and so far I think if I'm going to have this ground cover, I'm going to have to put every other plant that I want in pots because it is taking over. But then again, where you have flowers, you don't usually have weeds, or very many of them, so that can be a good thing. Another thing where you have to use a little discretion with your perennial plants. This is another sedum right here. It's a smaller sedum, not like the Autumn Joy sedums, but it is a beautiful little plant. I love it. More of the lilies. Even this little cactus. This is a thornless or almost thornless cactus that I got from Sunshine Nursery, and it has came back. That one year when we got everything going in the spring, it was already up and growing, and then we got a freeze, a deep freeze that lasted for 10 days, at least 10 days. Sometime it was below 17 below zero. It died, almost died out. It didn't quite, but it looked so pathetic. I didn't know if it was going to make it, but I got this one little panicle to make it. And if you move some of that sedum that's in front of it, the bottom part of this little panicle, you can tell it's had a terrible struggle, but it put on those two last year, and it's already put on these two, this one and this one, this year. And as I'm looking right here, I had to sit down because it's hot, and I needing to be in a little bit of a shade and let some air touch me a bit. But this is what I was trying to tell you about the hardy geranium, because you can tell that it is up there and blooming and looking great, and I really like it. It certainly, if you have your mind for the annual geranium, it does not resemble it at all. It's much less sparse, but it's beautiful. So the next thing what you would want to say probably is, well, then why even have annuals, all that beauty from perennials that just come back every year? But the reason is because almost every perennial has its little bloom time and then it's gone. Like those beautiful daisies, they won't stay in bloom very long. We'll enjoy them while they're here and they'll be gone. Same with the lilies. They'll be here for quite a little while off and on with their bloom, and then they'll be gone till next year. They will be back next year. That's the good thing. But the bad thing is they don't bloom all season long, whereas most annuals, once they start blooming, will bloom all season long, and just for that color, that beautiful color that you want in the garden, and something that will always have color or bloom somewhere in the garden for you the whole growing season. Oh, and as I'm saying that, I'm seeing two more plants that I want to tell you about in the perennial group. Make that three, because this little verbena is also perennial, and even though it's fading fast, this is Campanella bluebells. It's also a perennial and gives you several days or even a couple of weeks maybe of beautiful color. And here's another one I don't think I mentioned, but this is Sweet William, and it is also a wonderful perennial. They do not last very long, but Sweet William has one of the longest bloom times, and it's such a beauty. And this is the other one that I saw from my little seating area. I had to come over and get this. It's called Keys of Heaven, and it does, you can even see from here, probably I'll get up closer, but see all those little tiny tufts, and the wind carries them away, and they can pop up anywhere and everywhere. So you'll have to be a little bit careful with it too, but oh, isn't that pretty? I do love it. As a matter of fact, I had an area over here where I could not get anything to grow, and I thought, well, I wonder if maybe that would just proliferate and grow there, and guess what? It did. A lot of it is out of bloom now, but it's still a beautiful plant even when not in bloom, and especially beautiful when it is in bloom. And last but not least, this is Texas yucca. It's also a very pretty plant, and also a hummingbird beacon. Thank you to all my subscribers, and if you haven't yet, please be sure to like and subscribe to the channel.